The girl was named Yuria. 6 years ago, she was found dead inside the storage building on her family's property. When people discovered her body, they found that every drop of blood had been completely drained from it. A pair of dark purple bite marks was left on her neck. Fearing that she would return as a vampire, the villagers drove a wooden stake through her chest and pinned her down with a cross. 6 years later, on another stormy night, young Detective Hajime, Inspector Isamu, and Miyuki were forced to stop at an inn after their car broke down on the road. The inn was called Ruins, a unique hotel built around the theme of abandoned ruins. Its walls were cracked and peeling, as if they had once been scorched by a raging fire. Under the pounding rain, the entire place gave off an unsettling atmosphere. At the entrance, they happened to meet a writer named Junko. Judging by the way she casually greeted the waitress Aoko, it was obvious she was a regular guest. Aoko welcomed everyone inside the inn. After they rested in the lounge for a while, she escorted each of them to their rooms. Before they continued, Aoko warned everyone that the corridor ahead had fallen into disrepair. Anyone weighing more than 50 kilograms should not walk across it. Junko looked a little embarrassed. She admitted that she had probably gained too much weight after all the holiday feasting. Miyuki said she only weighed 46 kilograms, so she should be able to cross safely. After settling into her room, Miyuki couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Not long afterward, 2 more guests arrived at the inn. Ikuko was the director of a local hospital, and Masao was one of the doctors who worked under her. When dinner was served, everyone gathered around the table. Isamu became completely drunk and started making inappropriate remarks. His behavior infuriated Ikuko, who stormed away from the table. The moment she reached the doorway, she bumped into a mysterious man. Hearing Ikuko's scream, everyone rushed toward the entrance. Standing there was a man dressed entirely in black. The instant he saw Miyuki, the expression in his eyes suddenly changed. He pulled down the mask covering his face and blurted out a single name: Yuria. The man's name was Keisuke. He was a guest who had reserved a room in advance. The owner, Toru, quickly escorted him upstairs. Only after making sure he was settled did Toru come back downstairs. At that moment, Junko suggested something to Toru. Since the night had the perfect atmosphere, why not tell everyone the eerie local legend of the vampire? Toru invited everyone into the lounge to enjoy a few drinks while listening to the story. According to the legend, about 200 years ago, a Romanian man believed to be a vampire was exiled from his homeland. After wandering from place to place, he eventually arrived here and built this very building, which later became the Ruins Inn. His descendants continued living here for generations. Then, 6 years ago, something horrifying happened to the family. As Toru told the story, Miyuki was taking a bath on the first floor. After she finished, she stepped onto a scale to check her weight. The display read 47.1 kilograms. At that very moment, a strange figure silently appeared behind her. Meanwhile, Toru continued telling the story. At the time, the owner of the inn had already passed away. His only daughter, Yuria, suffered from a serious heart condition and frequently traveled to a nearby hospital for treatment. Then one day, someone claimed to have seen Yuria returning to the inn with a vampire. The next morning, several young men from the village broke into the inn. Behind a red wooden door in the basement, they found Yuria. She was lying motionless on a bed, already dead. A pair of dark purple bite marks was visible on her neck. Everyone was horrified, fearing that Yuria would rise again as a vampire. They drove a wooden stake through her chest. Later, Yuria's body underwent a forensic autopsy. The medical examiner reached a horrifying conclusion. Every single drop of blood had been drained from her body. What exactly happened to Yuria remains a mystery to this day. The portrait hanging on the wall of the inn was a painting of Yuria herself. Everyone agreed that she looked remarkably similar to Miyuki. As soon as the story ended, Hajime suddenly realized that Miyuki was nowhere to be found. By then, she had already been kidnapped. When Miyuki finally regained consciousness, she was horrified to see a vampire feeding on Ikuko's blood. Ikuko struggled for a few moments before going completely limp. Then, the vampire slowly turned and began walking toward Miyuki. At the very moment Miyuki lost consciousness, she silently cried out Hajime's name in her heart. Almost as if the two shared a connection, Hajime seemed to sense that something was wrong, but he dismissed it as nothing more than his imagination. Just then, Keisuke finished his drink. Toru immediately called for Aoko to bring him another bottle. Everyone continued drinking together in the lounge, but Hajime couldn't shake his growing sense of unease. He walked upstairs to the second floor and knocked on Miyuki's door. There was no response from inside. Then suddenly, A blood-curdling scream echoed from the direction of the first-floor bathhouse. Hajime threw open the bathroom door. Inside, Aoko was kneeling on the floor, wrapped in nothing but a bath towel. Her entire body was trembling uncontrollably. She had clearly been terrified beyond words. Hajime stepped into the bathhouse. The pool was filled with blood, and the overwhelming stench of it filled the entire room. Isamu knelt down and confirmed that the blood was human, and there was an enormous amount of it. The moment Hajime saw the blood, the first person who came to mind was Miyuki. He immediately sprinted upstairs to the second floor. Miyuki was lying unconscious on the floor. Not far away, Ikuko's body lay motionless on the bed. Isamu stepped forward and pulled back the scarf around Ikuko's neck. Beneath it was a pair of dark purple bite marks, as if they had been left behind by a vampire. Miyuki had an identical pair of bite marks on her neck. Ikuko's colleague Masao collapsed to the floor nearby. He kept muttering to himself that he would be the next victim. Just then, Miyuki suddenly felt dizzy and nauseous before losing consciousness once again. The autopsy later revealed that Ikuko had been strangled to death first. The bite marks were inflicted on her neck only after she had already died. Even more disturbing, her body contained an abnormally small amount of blood. The estimated time of death was between 8 and 9 o'clock, exactly when Toru had been telling the vampire story. At that time, Keisuke, Isamu, Hajime, and Toru had all been in the first-floor lounge. Everyone else had been occupied with their own activities. Miyuki had been taking a bath on the first floor, yet she woke up inside a room on the second floor. That meant the killer had knocked her unconscious and moved her upstairs afterward. But the only way between the two floors was the staircase. There was no way the killer could have carried an unconscious Miyuki right past Hajime and everyone else without being seen. The second-floor windows were all protected by iron bars, and there were no signs that anyone had entered from outside. So how had the killer managed to pull it off? Junko proposed a shocking theory. If Miyuki herself was the killer, then everything would make sense. Hajime immediately shut her down, saying that was complete nonsense. There was no way Miyuki could be the murderer. After all, she was the heroine of this entire anime series. Toru even insisted that Miyuki had to be a vampire. Otherwise, how could she look exactly like Yuria, the girl who died 6 years ago? Even Miyuki began wondering if she had somehow killed someone during a mental breakdown. Seeing how terrified Miyuki was, Hajime promised her that he would prove her innocence no matter what. Later, while searching near the bathhouse, Hajime and Isamu discovered a small freight elevator. The problem was that its maximum weight limit was only 45 kilograms. Miyuki weighed 47 kilograms. They even tried having Miyuki squeeze inside. Despite her slim figure, she still exceeded the weight limit. Next, they tested the elevator using bags of rice. The results showed that its true maximum capacity was actually 46 kilograms, 1 kilogram above its official rating. Even so, it still wasn't enough to carry Miyuki. Meanwhile, Masao packed his belongings and prepared to flee the inn. As he walked down the hallway, he thought he saw a vampire. The sight terrified him so badly that he let out a scream, dropping his medical documents all over the floor. Among them was Yuria's medical record. It revealed that her blood type was the extremely rare Bombay blood group. Toru explained that Yuria was the girl who had supposedly become a vampire 6 years earlier. Back then, her body had been discovered inside the basement behind a red wooden door. Hajime and Miyuki decided to investigate the basement themselves. When they arrived, they found nothing more than a few cardboard boxes and an old desk lamp. At that moment, Hajime suddenly noticed that Miyuki's hair seemed slightly shorter than before. In an instant, everything clicked. The countless clues that had appeared to have no connection, along with those ordinary, insignificant objects, all came together to reveal the complete truth. That's right, every mystery had finally been solved. Hajime immediately gathered everyone in the lounge and began explaining his deductions. The first thing Hajime declared was that vampires did not exist. This had been a meticulously planned murder from the very beginning. Everyone had assumed that the crime took place inside the second-floor guest room, but the real crime scene was actually the storage room on the first floor. Hajime then led everyone to the storage room. The moment the door opened, everyone froze in disbelief. The rundown storage room had been transformed into what looked exactly like a guest room, because Ruins was built around an abandoned building theme. Its worn-down appearance became the perfect cover for the killer's trick. All the killer had to do was spread a bedsheet over a few cardboard boxes, hang a curtain on the wall to imitate a window, and place a lamp inside. Just like that, a convincing guest room had been created. While drifting in and out of consciousness, Miyuki believed she was inside an actual guest room, the killer's fatal mistake. However, was the power cord lying across the floor? In every real guest room, the lamp's power cord was hidden from view. Only in this room did the cord run openly across the floor. Hajime explained that the killer first drugged Miyuki and carried her into the storage room. Then, the killer murdered Ikuko right in front of her, making Miyuki believe the murder had taken place upstairs. That was how the killer created the perfect alibi. Afterward, the killer used the freight elevator to move both Ikuko's body and Miyuki to the second floor. The killer then walked upstairs using the staircase and finished arranging the crime scene. Ikuko was a petite woman, so her weight was under 45 kilograms. However, Miyuki weighed 47 kilograms, which was 2 kilograms over the elevator's maximum capacity. Under normal circumstances, there would have been no way for the killer to transport her using the elevator, and yet, the elevator had worked perfectly. That was because the killer resorted to an extremely drastic method: bloodletting. A person can lose a certain amount of blood without it becoming life-threatening, based on Miyuki's body weight. As long as no more than 0.9 kilograms of blood were removed, her life would not have been in danger. The killer drained blood from Miyuki's body for one reason only: to reduce her weight. 47 kilograms minus 0.9 kilograms left her weighing 46.1 kilograms, but she was still 0.1 kilograms too heavy for the elevator to operate. At that moment, the killer came up with one final solution to eliminate the remaining excess weight. The answer was simple: cut off Miyuki's long hair. With that, the killer finally managed to get the elevator running and complete the entire murder plan. The bite marks on Miyuki's neck were never vampire bites at all. They were actually needle marks left behind from drawing her blood. By taking advantage of the vampire legend, the killer perfectly concealed the real evidence, and that killer was Aoko. When Aoko screamed in the bathhouse, she should have been just about to step into the bath, which meant she should have been completely undressed. But Hajime noticed something strange. She was tightly wrapped in a bath towel. That proved she hadn't screamed because she was frightened. It was all an act. Aoko wanted everyone to discover the body as quickly as possible, allowing them to accurately determine the victim's time of death and giving herself the perfect alibi. Originally, Aoko had planned to use Junko as the witness. Unfortunately, Junko had recently gained too much weight and could no longer fit within the elevator's weight limit. Just as Aoko was about to abandon her plan, she overheard Miyuki say that she weighed only 46 kilograms, so she immediately changed her target, choosing Miyuki instead to unknowingly help carry out the murder. Hajime believed that Aoko had been in such a hurry while cutting Miyuki's hair, that some loose strands had fallen not only onto the floor, but likely into her own pocket as well. That would become the crucial piece of evidence against her. Faced with the undeniable truth, Aoko finally gave up trying to defend herself. She collapsed to her knees and confessed to the murder. Yuria was actually her older half-sister. At first, the two had never known each other. Then, when Aoko was 12 years old, her mother passed away. With nowhere else to go, she came looking for her father, but he refused to let her in. He coldly told her that Yuria was his only daughter. Aoko broke down in tears. Other than her father, she had no one left to rely on. At her lowest moment, Yuria found the injured Aoko. She gently comforted her, gave her all of her savings, and entrusted her with a pendant. She also made Aoko a promise: the next time they met, they would finally live together as sisters. Aoko treasured that promise deep in her heart. It became the reason she kept living. No matter how difficult life became, that promise always gave her something to hold on to. 8 years later, Aoko excitedly went to see her sister again. Instead, she was met with the news that Yuria had supposedly been drained of her blood by a vampire. Aoko refused to believe such an absurd story. Determined to uncover the truth, she stayed in the area and found a job at a nearby hospital. One day, she happened to meet a father and his daughter. The man told her that his daughter had been critically injured 5 years earlier and desperately needed a blood transfusion. Her blood type was the extremely rare Bombay blood group. The man had assumed there was no chance of finding a compatible donor in such a rural area, but hospital director Ikuko told him that if he could pay 50 million yen, she could solve the blood shortage. Aoko was immediately suspicious. Yuria had died 5 years earlier, and she also had the rare Bombay blood group. Aoko became convinced that Ikuko had drained all of Yuria's blood, sold it to the father and daughter for an enormous profit, and then disguised Yuria's death as a vampire attack to cover up the crime. Aoko went to the hospital where Yuria had once been treated. There, she found Yuria's medical records, confirming her suspicions. Consumed by rage, she turned toward Masao and demanded the truth. Masao hurriedly tried to explain. He said that Yuria had already been on the verge of death, which was why they decided to collect her blood. Driven beyond reason, Aoko charged at him with a knife. Just before the blade could strike, Keisuke rushed forward and took the attack in Masao's place. He had been Yuria's boyfriend. He quietly told Aoko that if she continued down this path, Yuria would only be heartbroken. Those words finally reached her. Aoko collapsed to the ground, finally realizing how completely she had lost herself. Her obsession would not only destroy the people she hated, but would also destroy her own life. As tears streamed endlessly down Aoko's face, the blood-soaked darkness that had long haunted the ruins and finally began to fade away, and the sisters' promise to one day live together could only dissolve into a quiet sigh, vanishing forever with the passage of time.